minute, you will see the most powerful explosion ever witnessed by human eyes. The blast will come out of the horizon just about there. And this is the significance of the moment.
I know there were people in my town who would go out on the West Mountain, which was the highest mountain facing the west. And they would go out there early in the morning when a test was announced, and they would actually watch the test. But really all they could see would be a big flash and perhaps a cloud.
Ο Ντένις Νίλσον κατοικούσε τότε στο Σεντ Τζόρτζ, μια μικρή πολιτεία της Νεβάδα. Δεν ήξερε ότι χρησιμοποιούσαν την πόλη και τους κατοίκους της για πειραματόζωα.
In fact, it was directed over my town intentionally because the other areas were more populated. Las Vegas, Los Angeles, other areas were more likely to be contaminated and affect more people. So they intentionally waited until the wind was blowing towards St. George before they would detonate the bomb.
30 seconds to zero time. Put on goggles or turn away. Do not remove goggles or face burst until 10 seconds after the first light.
Minus 10 seconds. 9er, 8, 7, 6, 5er, 4, 3, 2, 1, T0.
Back in 1953, there were two very dirty fallout episodes that came from the Nevada test site. One was Shot Nancy, and the other was Shot Harry. They called it Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry actually saturated St. George with so much radiation that the Geiger counters all went off scale. My uncle owned a hardware store there, and he sold Geiger counters to prospectors who were doing uranium prospecting. Well, a lot of people went out and staked claims all over southern Utah thinking they had found uranium when all they had found was fallout hotspots. And so it was a giant joke. But people actually believed that they were all going to be rich because they had found these uranium deposits.
Η κυβέρνηση υποστήριζε ότι οι δοκιμές ήταν αυλαβείς.
They would say that there was no danger, that the fallout was minimal, or there was no fallout off-site, off the test site. But that was really not true. They knew that it was not true. But I do remember that one day the government agents were stopping cars in St. George, on the main street of St. George, that had come up from Nevada, on the highway from Nevada, and washing the cars. A couple of service stations there were washing cars to presumably wash the fallout off.
Ο Τζόζεφ Ρότμπλαντ είναι κάτοχος του βραβείου Νόμπελ Φυσικής και από τους εφευρέτες της ατομικής βόμβας.
Firstly, it followed the policy of the governments, both the United States and Britain, to minimize the effects, to tell the public, oh, don't worry, it is not what you get is not more than you get an X-ray if you get your, say, if you want to irradiate it, to see your lungs, see, a diagnostic X-ray, no more.
They even put badges on the people in St. George to see how much radiation they received. The radiation badges, the ones that measure gamma radiation, and I guess later on they could also measure beta radiation. They had a window in there to measure beta. But yes, and they told people that this was for their protection, but it wasn't that at all. They were measuring shielding factors and exposure factors so that they could calculate what the worst case scenario would be in a war game scenario. And then later on they came in and actually tested the children. They looked at their eyes, their teeth, their thyroids, and basically used us as guinea pigs. So yeah, St. George was a giant outdoor experiment in radiation biology.
I was one of the people whose work in radiation biology has shown that there's no threshold, that even the smallest dose of radiation could be harmful. But it took some time for the scientific community to accept this, even more time for the governments to accept it.
These are obituaries of my 3 family members who've died. This is my father, who died of lung cancer. My father was a non-smoker, so this seemed very strange that he should die of lung cancer. My mother was only 47 years old. She died of a brain tumor. And within 2 years, my brother had contracted a lymphoma. I myself had developed skin cancer and had it removed twice and eventually had to have a skin graft. And this one is my sister. She was assistant U.S. attorney in Salt Lake City and died at age 40 of colon cancer. And it was her death that really got me to become active, convinced me that this was a real tragedy, a nuclear tragedy in America.
Οι δοκιμές στους κατοίκους πειραματόζωα έδειχναν ότι η πυρηνική ενέργεια είναι εξαιρετικά επικίνδυνη. Αλλά οι αμερικανικές αρχές αξιοποίησαν τα πειράματα για να φτιάξουν πυρηνικά εργοστάσια.
There's 104 nuclear plants in the United States, and the poor people who live near those nuclear plants, the closer the worst, are being impacted by just these nuclear plants burp. They let go, they let out their radioactive gases regularly, every several days. Right in the middle of Long Island is a thing called Brookhaven National Laboratory, and that has had several reactors polluting our major river, the Peconic River, sending radioactive poisons in our air. And lo and behold, we have a substantial breast cancer rate.
Στο Long Island, ένα πολύ chic προάστιο της Νέας Υόρκης, υπάρχει μια γυναικεία οργάνωση που αποκαλείται 1 στις 9. 1 στις 9 γυναίκες της περιοχής έχουν προσβληθεί από καρκίνο του μαστού.
On Long Island, we had these 2 reactors on top of the Long Island aquifer. This is in the suburbs of New York City, with 3 million people drinking out of this aquifer. It's laced with tritium, plutonium, strontium. So all those years they were dripping this strontium-90 and plutonium into our aquifer. There was like an epidemic.
This whole country has been affected. Most people don't realize it. Fallout across the entire country. The United States has had almost a 5-fold increase in cancer since the turn of the century.
It was the number 8 disease in the United States in the year 1900, at the turn of the century, 100 years ago. It is now number 2. 1 in every 2.5 people will die of cancer, and soon it will be 1 in 2. Longevity is not the prime factor. The prime factor appears to be environmental pollutants. And a lot of those environmental pollutants involve nuclear technology, involve radioactivity. And a lot of the environmental pollutants involve chemistry and chemical contaminants.
Η αχίλλειος πτέρνα της πυρηνικής τεχνολογίας είναι τα απόβλητα των πυρηνικών εργοστασίων. Έχουν ζωή χιλιάδων χρόνων και δεν αποθηκεύονται πουθενά. Το πρόβλημα έχει πάρει καταστροφικές διαστάσεις και στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία, προκαλώντας τις αντιδράσεις της οικολογικής οργάνωσης Greenpeace.
The Sellafield reprocessing plant pumps out 10 million litres of waste into the environment every day. And this means that the Irish Sea has become one of the most contaminated seas in the world. They discharge what they would call the lower level radioactivity in liquid form into the ocean. They discharge radionuclides such as krypton into the air. And then they have high-level waste, which is extremely toxic, radiotoxic, and that is kept on site. It's so hot that you can't store it, for example, underground or in any other way. You have to wait for 50 to 100 years for it to cool down before it can be handled.
Η Ιρλανδική κυβέρνηση έχει μηνύσει τη Βρετανική για τη μόλυνση. Μέσω της θάλασσας, τα απόβλητα μεταφέρονται σε μεγάλες αποστάσεις.
There have been a number of different studies, both on the Irish side of the Irish Sea and also in Cumbria. There are what they've called, if you like, hotspots of child leukemia, for example, and many farmers could not sell their lambs to the market, for example. They are now finding levels of plutonium and technetium-99 in seafood, not just around Cumbria, but as far away as Norway and the German Bight. And so we are spreading a footprint of radioactivity, not just locally, but inevitably globally. It means that there are higher rates of cancer in that region, and it means that we're leaving a legacy to future generations because this radioactivity is spreading throughout the environment. It's not contained, it's being diluted into the environment.
Παρόμοιο αδιέξοδο και στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες. Τα πυρηνικά απόβλητα ρίχνονται παντού, όπως.
They put these things everywhere on top of water. Like I was in Amarillo, Texas, where they store the nuclear warheads. It's on top of the Oglala Aquifer, which is the world's largest freshwater aquifer. It goes from Texas all the way up to North Dakota. They stuck the nuclear warheads right on top of it. They have up in Idaho by the Snake River. The nuclear navy stores their old submarine reactors. They're in these raw open earth pits on top of the aquifer in an earthquake zone. I mean, they put things in the craziest places. You know, we have Indian Point right up the Hudson River, 25 miles from New York.
Μετά τις διαμαρτυρίες κατοίκων και οικολογικών οργανώσεων, οι αμερικανικές αρχές βρήκαν μια έξυπνη λύση. Αγοράζουν μια περιοχή που ανήκει στους Ινδιάνους για να αναποθέσουν τα πυρηνικά σκουπίδια.
They're one of the poorest tribes in Utah. Well, because their land is so bad. I mean, it's really not good for much of anything.
It's on the Western Shoshone sacred lands. Yucca Mountain, this mountain which it turns out has water seeping there, so even if they put the nuclear waste there, it wouldn't be safe for even the 10,000 years they're calculating, let alone the 250,000 years that we know it's going to last for.
And they want to sell their whole reservation to the nuclear atomic power companies to deposit their waste before Yucca Mountain is finished. So they are expecting to move all of this waste out to Utah on its way to Nevada and park it in the middle of the desert in casks, these big giant concrete casks.
Ακούγεται μακάβριο, αλλά ο τελικός προορισμός των αποβλήτων είναι πάλι η Νεβάδα, το μέρος όπου έγιναν οι πρώτες πυρηνικές δοκιμές. Τα απόβλητα φτάνουν στο Σεντ Τζορτζ, τη μολυσμένη πόλη του Ντένις Νέλσον.
Most of that is going to come down either by train or by truck through southern Utah, and if it comes by truck, it's going to go right to the middle of St. George. So 50 years later, or thereabouts, things are coming back from where they came originally. I mean, this is an anathema to the people in Utah, the people who lost family members. We see that as nothing more than genocide. It would be like the Germans rekindling the gas chambers to start executing people again.
Υπάρχει όμως και μια άλλη έξυπνη λύση για τα πυρηνικά απόβλητα. Business. Η Βρετανική κυβέρνηση εισάγει και από άλλες χώρες πυρηνικά απόβλητα. Τα εμπλουτίζει για να χρησιμοποιηθούν ξανά και τα εξάγει, μαζί με τα δικά της.
So this is what we saw earlier this year. 2 ships carrying the MOX fuel, which contains enough plutonium for about 50 nuclear bombs. The casks in which the plutonium is contained has to meet international standards whereby it could burn for 30 minutes at 800 degrees centigrade. Now most ship fires are for more than 24 hours and at temperatures above 800 degrees centigrade. We're concerned that British Nuclear Fuels, in spite of this shipment earlier this year, is still planning to send a similar shipment of plutonium MOX to Switzerland. Not even on these specially designed ships, but on an old roll-on, roll-off ferry that's been converted into a nuclear carrier. It's called the Atlantic Osprey. It has had 2 fires in the last couple of years.
Τη δεκαετία του 80 ανακαλύφθηκε μία ακόμη μέθοδος χρησιμοποίησης των πυρηνικών αποβλήτων. Οβίδες από απεμπλουτισμένο ουράνιο.
There's literally hundreds of tons or thousands of tons of depleted uranium left over, and they don't know what to do with it. It's sitting around in these big drums, and so if they can sell it to make munitions, well, you know, that's a great idea. It's just that it contaminates areas that are involved in a battle using this.
Ραδιενεργές οβίδες χρησιμοποιήθηκαν για πρώτη φορά στον πόλεμο του κόλπου και ύστερα στη Ιουγκοσλαβία και το Αφγανιστάν.
Je pense que les enjeux économiques sont faramineux. Oui. Vous imaginez l'ensemble des obus de la guerre du Golfe, le coût que ça a dû, l'argent que ça a pu rapporter sur des stocks qui n'ont rien coûté, des stocks gratuits de déchets nucléaires, c'est absolument faramineux.
Ο δημοσιογράφος Μαρτίν Μεζονιέ ερεύνησε τις επιπτώσεις από τη χρήση του απεμπλουτισμένου ουρανίου στους στρατιώτες μετά τον πόλεμο στο Κωσυφοπαίδιο.
La France n'a reconnu ces malades de la guerre du Balkan après tout le monde. Mais je sais qu'en Belgique, ce qui est très intéressant, c'est que le général Van den Hoof, qui est quand même le médecin en chef de l'armée belge, a fait faire un audit de la santé de tous les soldats qui étaient dans les Balkans, donc 17 000 soldats, et qu'ils ont 20% des soldats qui sont malades, enfin, ou qui se plaignent de problèmes de santé. C'est énorme.
Το ίδιο ραδιενεργό όπλο χρησιμοποιείται σήμερα στον πόλεμο του Ιράκ.